Everyone, it is Tuesday, October 17th, 2023, and you are at a Wausau Waterworks Commission meeting at Wausau City Hall. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. We have everybody on the commission here in person. Super excited. And the first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of our September 5th, 2023 meeting. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Alder Herbst and a second by Commissioner Jean. Is there any discussion? And seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of the September 5th, 2023 meeting can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up is our director's report on utility operations, and I'll pass it over to Director Lindman.
Thanks, Mayor. There's a couple items I wanted to highlight, the first two. One is asset management. So for the Department of Public Works and Utilities, you know, we've been ready to move this forward, especially with the utility and the new facilities online since last year. We had a conversation with IT last year. It was sort of put on hold because IT wanted to put an RFP out. They wanted to do further investigation of software and then also work with the county to have one software. So we were waiting on that a little bit. They came to us in June and basically said that the county wasn't ready to move forward and make any decisions at this time. So I kind of picked that ball back up to write an RFP. We did look at several platforms with asset management, some larger players as well as some other smaller players. The utility really settled in on CityWorks, which is compatible with our Workday HR finance software, as well as the platform seems to be a very user-friendly platform for all of our staff. And it does everything that we need within public works and utilities, from vertical to horizontal assets, work orders, time tracking, all of these things. So I've been working with GIS, making sure it works with our Esri platform, which they do. And there's two components to the asset management that we're looking at. One is the purchase of the software itself, and the other is actually to have the work and the integration done, put all of our assets into the software, which is a different firm. So working with CityWorks, they have a cooperative purchasing through GSA pricing. That is for the integration with Axum Geospatial. They've done a lot of large contracts. They've integrated with Workday on other municipalities. So we'd like to start working on a contract with them. And then also for the actual purchase of the software for CityWorks, they've won several RFPs with other municipalities, so we would plan on piggybacking off of those and working with them on a software suite that would work specifically what we need to move forward. Being as we know what software that we want to go with, you know, this eliminates the need to do an RFP and go through an exercise that when we already know and we've already evaluated the software that we'd like, but it also meets all of our procurement policies within the city. And so we'll start working on a contract with them and a scope of services with them. This is going to be a longer process, and it's going to be stepped out. Initially, we're just going to do our vertical assets with the water and sewer because we do have a budget for that for 23 already. And then as that gets implemented, probably late 24 is when we'll start working with integrating that into Workday. So I just wanted to give the commission an update on that project because it's kind of been, it was budgeted in 23. We'll carry those funds over into 24, but we expect to move that forward yet this fall into winter.
It looks like we have a quizzical Commissioner Robinson.
Yeah. Are we leasing the equipment or buying it? And what sort of commitment do we have relative to support going on into the future? Right.
There will be an ongoing contract with CityWorks. I don't know what the cost of that will be at this time. And I also don't know with the pieces of the software that we'll be purchasing initially for our vertical assets. That's something that we'll need to know specifically what those costs are for the software.
Well, I would look too for a commitment on supporting it, because what happens with many of those software packages is you used to buy them and now you lease them, and then they just decide they're going to stop supporting it. And I think we would want to, as part of that negotiation, try to get a commitment relative to support or credit on the next release.
Sure.
Or whatever. Those are very expensive contracts.
Correct, they are. And I think that typically, we would probably be looking at a 3 to 5 year, contract with them, renewable at some point. But but I'd also like to see what other municipalities are doing as well. So I think this is a very stable company and a stable software, yeah.
So with the integration with the vertical assets, will we then be able to utilize that for the LSL project? If we're starting to integrate, will we be able to integrate in such a way as we'll be able to categorize the material, whether it's lead or other type of pipe? Will that, for, truly in terms of asset management, what we have to replace, it would fall into the discussions we're going to have later. What's the extent of that integration?
Yeah, the integration of the actual asset management that'll really be for our PMs on our equipment and stuff on the vertical assets, right? Like right now in GIS is really where we're implementing our inventory, whether that's lead service lines, types of pipe, age of pipes, size of pipes, all of those things that we have for water and sewer, storm sewer. So that's in our Esri platform. But CityWorks does work directly with that. So all that information that we have will be used actually in asset management. But to answer your question, because we won't be doing our horizontal assets immediately, it'll be a couple years before we would be able to do something in asset management related to lead service. Yeah.
I will say, since it's been a little bit since we had this meeting scheduled and then rescheduled, I did have an opportunity to talk through this with our prioritization with IT. And still similar conversations. The county eventually is going to want this. And so we're kind of talking through what are the needs. So that's something maybe following up with Lance would be helpful, or Jim. Yes, Commissioner Jean.
Besides this being a prudent thing, are we required by DNR or by the PSC to have this in place?
No, but we are required to have, obviously certain operations and maintenance done on an annual basis, with our flushing, with our gate valves, with our water meters, a lot of it's on the horizontals. I don't know if we have anything specific in our vertical assets that we have to have, Scott?
Well, a lot of it would just be trying to keep up with our PMs.
Yes.
And our maintenance just in the plant itself. I mean, we have 3 people that work in the plant, and we have probably 3,000 items that need to be maintained. So it's hard to keep that straight on a daily basis without some kind of tracking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the job costing eventually, as we walk into that too, will really help in our operation budgets. And I think CityWorks does a pretty good job on what they have and how that's going to integrate as well. So.
All right, moving on.
One more thing on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from the discussions that we had at the last commission meeting, and then also in the HR committee on the organization and reclassifications, Finance and myself have reached out to Ellers. They are preparing some financial information on that. And then once we feel like we have all the information put together, there was a request to have a joint HR commission meeting prepared. And so once we know when that can happen, some dates and stuff, so just to let you know that will probably be happening in the next few weeks. So you'll probably be seeing some requests on availability coming up.
The meeting palooza continues.
Yes, it does. Yeah,
We're good?
I think so.
Is there any, Mr. Jean?
I've heard it both ways, so I just wanted clarified. The granular activated carbon units, are they before the resin or are they after the resin bank?
Carbon be after the an exchange. Currently, the plant will be situated that we can change that in the future. If there's ever another media that would be more beneficial to be put in front of the carbon or behind the carbon, we can switch it back and forth, but currently we'll be after.
When can I take my selfie with one of those vessels?
Next summer.
All right, I'm ready. All right, are we ready to move on? Oh, Mr. Robinson.
On that note, so the carbon will be after the resin. So what, we're doing the change out on the resin now for absorption of PFAS. And we put the resin in place for TOC and other issues. Will the fact that it's first in line compromise its ability to remove the other, if you will, materials or contaminants of concern in the resin or not?
No, the ion exchange will remove the TOC, making the carbon more efficient for PFAS removal. So it won't be overworking the carbon by removing the TOC ahead of it.
But will the resin then also remove PFAS, or are we modifying the resin?
There will be some removal to some extent.
So does
but
that, as we're doing that removal, there's only, the resin can absorb X amount of material. Do we know that the resin will not, its assimilative capabilities will not be impacted by the PFAS to negatively impact the TOC?
It is expected that once the PFAS builds up on the resin and starts sloughing it off, like we saw in that last, or that 22.7 parts per trillion PFAS number that we had. So when the resin gets full and it starts sloughing, that will be captured in the carbon.
No, but does the presence of PFAS in the resin compromise the ability of the resin to capture the TOC? Because we were looking at a resin change out of a couple times a year for PFAS. We were looking at I thought you said a resin change out for TOC of 20 years, was it?
Correct. It is not expected.
Okay.
So it doesn't compromise those other functions?
No, it is not
Okay.
expected to compromise that.
And then where are we on the change out of the resin?
The sixth vessel was changed out on Friday, so we are all new resin as of Friday.
Woohoo.
And the cost, final cost?
I haven't seen a final number. I think the bid, it was included in the bid on the project. I think it was a little over 1.1.
I think so. Yeah, a little over $1 million. That included the resin, right?
Correct.
And disposal?
Disposal has not been done yet. We are storing the extracted resin on site, looking at options.
And that would be an additional cost?
That will be an additional cost.
I see Jim Force.
Yeah. Just to be clear, Scott, we are replacing resin because of PFAS loading on that resin. Is that going to be a similar situation, or will it be different once we have the carbon vessels in place? In other words, are we going to continue to be replacing resin because of PFAS loadings?
We are not intending to. There is one more resin change out that was bid in our contract for construction. After that, the resin is anticipated to go 15 to 20 years for TOC removal, and then PFAS would be removed from the carbon system on the tail end of the plant.
So 15 to 20 years, even though there's some PFAS loading on the IX resin?
Correct.
Okay. Regarding disposal, what are our options, or maybe you don't know that yet?
Right now, we're working with the State Lab of Hygiene, so they can do some testing on the resin. This is fairly new. So what we did is we sent them some brand-new resin that was not used anymore or even introduced into the system. They're going to artificially place some PFAS on that resin and then try to remove it and see how accurate the removals are. Once they figure out how they can accurately remove PFAS from the resin, then they will send some samples down and they can tell us how much PFAS is actually in the resin.
I'm so thrilled somebody finally took us up on our free PFAS offer. Good work.
I only ask, and I'm not being an alarmist here or anything, but there was a story on public radio this week, I don't know if anybody heard it, about PFAS contaminated resins and other materials being disposed of in, I believe it was Alabama, in a poor neighborhood. So it was, the ultimate disposal of this material is something I think we need to know about and we need to be concerned about.
I do know that the governor last year, I think, sent out an RFP to all the communities saying, hey, would you like to host hazardous waste landfill? I don't think anybody took him up on that offer, but I know that there are hazardous waste landfills around the country right now. So that's probably a continuing conversation that will happen.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Robinson.
I believe that the Alabama facility is primarily taking AFFF firefighting foam. That's what's
It's related to military installation probably too.
what's going.
Well, I only raise it as an example of what can happen if we're not careful in watching what happens to our material and who the contractor is.
Right. We did, as a city, sign on to an environmental justice resolution, the first in the state, so I don't think that would be an acceptable way for us to dispose of anything that would be hazardous to people, especially those vulnerable populations.
Good.
Are there any further? Yeah, Mr. Robinson.
I know it may be premature, but as it relates to that separation and sequestration of the PFAS from the resin, would that yield the resin then to be reusable if we can sequester or capture it off of the resin and potentially reuse the ion exchange resin in the future? Or we don't know that?
We don't know that.
But
We
that would be
don't
a
know.
question that we should ask the lab to evaluate in their process.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm not aware of a good process to do that yet. But I think the first step is to figure out how much PFAS is on that resin, how they take it off, and then we can look at it.
I'd just like to suggest that, too, we might want to reach out to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee because of some of the research that they're doing to see if they might be able to add some value to that evaluation process.
We definitely have those researchers in our Rolodex, so good call.
I do know that the EPA is also doing some testing for us, and they had also expressed interest in taking some of that resin, that used resin, and doing some testing and bench testing on that as well. So I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but I think that they're interested in that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Jean.
I don't know if it's been said, but I can assure you the water quality is exceptionally beautiful right now, and I won't tell you how I know.
You're cleaning your toilet less?
Yes.
Cool. Are we ready to move on? All right. Well, let's move on to item number 3, discussion on proposed ordinance for mandatory lead service line replacement. And just maybe as an intro, this is just for discussion. I've been getting several questions about this. People are nervous about a mandatory replacement, so we'll continue this discussion as long as we need to. Mr. Lindman.
Yeah, so as you know, a couple of years ago, this was brought forward. Obviously, quite a few things had changed, like the time duration that we had proposed or the commission had proposed to replace lead service lines. The ordinance is intertwined in this, and in one important way is that the PSC requires approval to use user rates to pay back any loans or pay for private side lead service lines. And part of their requirement is to have a mandatory ordinance in place. Initially, when we brought this forward, there was, it was pretty cut and dried. Like, typically if somebody were, it was written in a way that typically in the same way that if somebody were to annex into the city, they would have 1 year to connect to water and sewer if available, right? And so we had written a couple years ago this ordinance in that way. But since then, other ordinances from other municipalities have been written to have certain circumstances in them that there will be, it is required to replace that lead service line as funding is available, right? Or as the utility essentially can afford it, right? And so in this ordinance, those situations are written into the ordinance. So we're not giving people a mandated deadline, like within 12 months they have to do this, right? Because there is a cost burden to them, if that were to be the case. And so we wanted to bring this forward and have the discussion with the commission again. with some of those explanations, and been working with our staff, Tegan from the legal office, to help write this and update this. We've been using other municipalities' language as well that actually have these ordinances in place. And so we're really looking to get some feedback and maybe any other ideas, or just have a discussion about this. And if this is something you want brought back for action as it relates to a lead service line ordinance.
Mr. Force.
Eric, do we have a deadline on this? I mean, is there a time certain when we need to adopt something?
Yeah, right now, we have, through the EPA Lead Service Line Accelerator Program, we have an engineering firm working on the PSC application, which, you know, we had asked them to have something drafted before the end of the year. So, no, we're not on a hard and fast deadline, Jim, but and for the first year, I think we're doing fairly well as far as potential funding for lead service lines. And also, the lead service lines that we're focusing on for 2024 is just the private side, which is where the principal forgiveness is. So we're looking at homes where the city's already replaced the public side. So, but again, you know, as we move forward with this lead service line program, if it becomes necessary to use user rates, right, to pay back either loans or, and that also ties into how much is the commission and the city going to commit to no cost to homeowners through this whole program, you know? And then where does that additional funding come from as well, so.
Mr. Robinson.
Have we projected out the private side cost or exposure, what that would be? Do we know what the cost would be?
So the national average, I think, is what we are looking at right now for that baseline, and it's about $10,000 a line.
For just the private side or for?
Yeah, I think we anticipate, especially in the neighborhoods that we're working on, because they're shorter lines, being less than that.
Right.
But also you'll see later on, you know, when we work with community infrastructure partners in their contract under the performance incentives, they're giving us a cost per site, right? That, you know, it will not exceed this, and if it does, they will take that cost if it comes in less. That's one of their performance incentives within that contract. And so, you know, if we look at the public side, it's going to be more because we have the street, curb, sidewalk, everything, right? So, but we do anticipate, hopefully, you know, we're anticipating less than $10,000 on the private side. So, yeah.
Mr. Force.
We just completed that section of Grant Street between 6th and 7th.
Yeah.
How many lines were replaced there, and what was the average cost? The private line.
Do you remember that, Scott? What Marathon bid on those?
And Kickbush?
Yeah, it was close to, we were surprised. It came in lower than what we had
Yeah.
anticipated. I think it was like $3,100 or $3,200 a piece for the private side. I think there was like, in Kickbush, there was a lot more services than there was on Grant. I think there was only a handful on Grant that were necessary
Right.
to change out, so.
Mr. Jean.
Under item 4 of the purpose of the ordinance, it speaks to mineral-rich groundwater flowing through the lead and galvanized pipes. I'm not sure that'd be fair to say after we've had treatment.
Very
Because
good point, Joe.
I could see that, and I don't know what version of treatment we had prior to the I think it was 65, which is still in existence. But I don't know what kind of treatment was going on before that. But since then, I would think that's been minimal. Although my observation when I worked, I did not see buildup in the lead. I did see the buildup that existed in the galvanized. I don't know what the nature of it is, but galvanized always were the issue. Pipe
Right.
would choke up. So I don't know if you need to modify that. I think it's,
I'll definitely take a look at that. Appreciate that.
What else? Mr. Force.
So Eric, If there is no, if my public line right now is a lead line, and if you're not going to replace it for whatever reason for several years, and I have a private lead service line, the ordinance does not mandate that I change out until my street, my public line is changed out.
Right, or if,
So that could be some time.
yeah, there could be some time. I think that the other thing is that could be reversed too, Jim. Like if we're looking at and let's say funding comes available, right, for the private side, right, in grant funding, as of October 24, we're not going to be able to do partials. So the city, if the homeowner elects to change their side, then the city has to change their side. There's no partial replacements anymore at that point. So I think that, whichever way it goes, right, that the entire line will have to be replaced. And as we get into this 5-year time frame, eventually we're going to get to those properties. And that's where there's going to have to be a decision from the city. Is the city going to fund 100% of the private side as well as, obviously they have to fund our side, right? And so if we're not getting enough principal forgiveness, where is that additional offset funding going to come from? Yeah.
And then just to follow up, my last question on this, do you know, according to our community partners proposal or agreement, is there a discussion between the contractor in this case and the homeowner as to what type of boring, whether it'll be horizontal or open trench, or does that discussion take place with the homeowner?
Yes, absolutely. So the construction methods that happen will be in conjunction with the contractor that's hired and the homeowners, but there'll also be a lot of upfront communication through community infrastructure partners and our public outreach portion of that project, which CIP has already begun preparing for us. And so I think that really is going to be the key, right? Because as you point out, people are going to want to know what this is going to look like, what damage is going to get done, how's it going to get repaired, and those construction methods are absolutely going to be part of that discussion, yes.
Mr. Robinson?
I know for me that it would be helpful if we had a better fiscal impact or estimate on what the cost would be in light of that. And we've got, Grant Street, 31, 3,200 per private side replacement, and estimated cost is 10,000. That makes a big difference. And I think ultimately the people are going to want to know what's there. You're dealing with your older housing stock, typically, which is closer to the road, smaller lots. So some of that, I don't know if there is anything like a typical replacement, but I think we could estimate and maybe we can have that part of our, as we prepare to enter into the contract for the acceleration, get better numbers.
Anything else on the lead service line replacement ordinance?
Is this something you want us to continue to evaluate and bring back next month then for consideration to move forward?
I think.
Okay, all right. And I think, John, when we look at the private side and what we're seeing right now, I think a good rule of thumb would be $4,500 to $5,000 on the private side, and I'm hoping that we'll continue to see those bids at that point. And are you looking for cost specifically on the private side as well as the public side, or, how, what kind of cost? And is it on a year-to-year basis or total for the project that we anticipate in today's dollars, or how do you?
All of the above.
Okay.
All
All right.
I think
Yeah.
what we're looking at is how do we sequence it, but what's
Yeah.
the universe of the cost? And obviously you need to know from a utility perspective of what the public side costs are going to be,
Correct.
because we have to have those
Yeah.
dollars in fund.
Yep.
We need to know what the private side is in order to secure the funding. And so I think we've got we've got some schedules laid out in the contract. If we can work on what's the universe, and then what's it going to be in terms of an annual impact.
Okay.
And what would that mean? So if you can do that, I know it's going to be difficult, but if we can get some ballpark figures.
I think we can for like the total costs, but again, like, when we talk about the funding and what principal forgiveness we're gonna get, that's gonna be a question year to year, right?
Right.
Based on those total dollars, so just, okay.
And
But that can be arranged.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, just want to make that clear, okay.
And not to throw us way off task here, but, one of the things we have been talking about with the DNR about this whole project is about the outreach. And that's not necessarily something that the DNR pays for, but it is something that foundations could pay for. So we're having those conversations too. And maybe that's something that we would outline in there, you can just have a spreadsheet palooza or something.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are we good to move on? Awesome. All right, we are now on to item number 4, discussion and possible action approving an agreement with Westrom Leak Detection for leak surveys in years 2025, 2027, and 2029.
Scott.
This is just asking for approval for a 3-year agreement with Westrom. They've been doing this for 25 odd years. He knows their system, finds leaks every time he comes. Works well with our staff. We just want to extend this agreement. Pricing is comparable with other companies that do the same work.
Mr. Jean.
Also move.
Looks like we have a motion to approve this action and a second by Mr. Forrest. Got there slightly ahead of Alder Herbst. Any discussion or questions you'd like answered on this? Okay, all of those in favor of approving the agreement with Westrom Leak Detection for leak surveys in years 2025, 2027, and 2029 can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? All right, that passes unanimously. Next up is item number 5, discussion and possible action on sole source request for well 3 rehabilitation and cleaning.
This would be mine too. I made a mistake here somewhere along the line. Had a sole source written out before we did the work on well 3. The work is now done, so this is money owed. I did the paperwork, set it up, and for some reason it never came here for approval. The costs that were quoted were the same pricing that was quoted in 2017, the last time the well was repaired. What happened is the well just hit a wall, started losing production fast. We weren't going to be able to keep our numbers up. This company had done a good job for us on another project before, it was available, so we had them come in and do this. The original quote was just over $30,000. They finished that work and we're not happy with the results. So I asked them to do another chemical treating, where the well is back to almost new pumping right now, but I have an outstanding bill.
Questions, comments, maybe a motion?
I'll also move.
I have a motion by Commissioner Jean, a second by Alder Herbst. Any discussion? Mr. Jean?
This is not about the cleaning, but I know we can't make the well go away. Is PFAS been added as a reason why we can't work with the consent decree and
It is.
okay.
We had a plan worked out with EPA to actually remove well 3 from the system. We were just going to actually aerate it and then waste it to the river. But now that PFAS has been discovered in the well, we have to continue treating it and using it the way it's being used now.
Well, when the consent decree was drafted, PFAS wasn't even in anybody's brain, let alone you couldn't even test it.
Oh, it was there. We
Well,
just
I didn't
know
say it
about
wasn't there. I just so then Marathon Electric should turn their well back on, which is off, and I don't understand how that got off.
Yeah, I did, yeah, and really it was the discharge, from, because the new surface water requirement with the.
It's over the
Yeah.
surface water
Yep.
PFAS numbers.
Yep.
Well, my request is we just shut it down.
We've asked that as well.
You did ask that. huh?
Yes.
I think we should use our political clout and work
I
on
see you
that.
looking at me. I feel like I've yelled at too many people today already.
We do have continued conversations with the EPA through our consultant, and this is a continuous thing on the agenda, because it would be a benefit to the city if we could pull it from our potable water system as a water supply. So
Maybe we can reach out. I see Mr. Robinson looking quizzical once again.
So who's doing our work for, which consultant are we using for that?
why did I know that?
Conestoga Rover.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Formerly GED or whatever.
that's a good question. I just have GEI in my mind for some other environmental work, but that's not right.
I know they had that change. Is it worthwhile, I would just ask the question for staff to think through of, sometimes when you get fresh sets of eyes on something, you get different approaches that might be acceptable to regulatory agencies, but I think one of the concerns would be if you stop 3, what impact that might do to the hydraulic, the cone of depression and/or hydraulics on the west side, because I remember having the discussion, there's no way that well 3 is pulling things from the west side, and lo and behold, it was pulling contaminant from the west side. Remember that, Joe? The kind of the infamous Gary, or the Cold Springs discussion years ago. So I think we would want, just think about whether or not it might, from a value engineering perspective, just be worthwhile to bring somebody else in to take a look at it and see if there's a different approach that we could take, if it's not too expensive.
Sure.
Are you recollecting a 40-year-old conversation?
I am recollecting
Wow.
a few discussions from
I'm impressed.
from
That's all.
1988.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. Yes, Mr. Jean.
My comment to that is, I recall that we had that, I think we had a well, not a well, but monitoring out on that island, and that, I think, confirmed that activity.
There was a barge that they brought in to do that well. So I think we have to be sensitive to what's driving their response and see if we can address it a different way. But I think it's probably because there's a cone of depression, if you will, or a hydraulic head that is being altered or could be altered if that well were to be shut down. So I think we need to understand what the ramifications of that might be to some of our west side wells too.
And ultimately, that's why the plan was to keep it running, only treating the water and wasting it to the river until we
Yeah.
just decided that there was some, no concern or some certainty that it wouldn't cause an issue elsewhere.
Any other comments, or are we ready to vote on the topic at hand? All right, so all of those in favor of approving action on the sole source request for well 3, rehabilitation and cleaning, can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, and we definitely have some follow-up from that too, thank you. Great, we are now on to item number 6, discussion and possible action on approving ongoing sole source request for lab testing services through Northern Lake Services, Inc. Who would like that one?
Scott?
This would just be a request that would probably get rid of some RFP work and some more paperwork. Most of the labs that we're running through either specialize in some kind of testing or they're very competitive in their pricing. Some labs that we've ran into, even with PFAS testing out in California, were cheaper, but by the time you pay for the samples to get there and get back, the cost is similar. We have a very good working relationship with Northern Lake Service. We have a great, we've worked out a nice delivery system where we can overnight in between facilities. We don't have to have staff drive samples. We don't have to have them step out. The delivery service comes to our office. It just simplifies things, reduces costs, and instead of trying to get quotes every time we need to take some lab samples, I would appreciate a approval of using staff discretion to use Northern Lake Service for our sampling needs.
Oh, they're on. Okay.
Mr. Jean.
I'll move that.
All right, I have a motion from Jean and a second by Robinson. Mr. Force, do you have a comment?
No, I was going to move.
Oh, all right, we're moving. Alder Herbst.
I just have a question, and maybe I'm off base. What is the cost for this going to be?
Our Generally, Northern Lakes, we do probably $150,000 worth of sampling a year.
Okay. Thank you.
It's budgeted sampling. It's just reducing the requirement for RFP or quotes every time we want to go out for a group of samples.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion, or are we ready? Alrighty, all of those in favor of approving the ongoing sole source request for lab testing services through Northern Lakes Services, Inc. can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we do have item number 7, where we are talking about discussion on utility financial strategies and key performance indexes. I do see that Monica is joining us, and I think maybe Marianne is with her. I'm hoping we have everyone ready to have that discussion, but you let me know. Do you think we should? Oh. Okay.
Okay.
So maybe this will be ready for next time?
Hopefully, yes.
All right. All right, we will, we'll skip this for now, and then we'll be ready and thrilled to talk through financial strategies. Thanks, Monica. All right, item number 8, discussion and possible action on approving a contract with Community Infrastructure Partners, known as CIP, for lead service line replacement.
Yeah, so this has been discussed, obviously, several times at the commission, but this is the actual contract right now. Legal had their first review of it and have some comments that they want to discuss with CIP's attorney. But I think in general, the concept is for this project to begin moving forward is here. And so if the commissioners have any questions or would consider approval on this, subject to legal final review and discussion and approvals, so.
Mr. Robinson.
So I had, at the last non-meeting, I had some discussions with them relative to some clarifications, and I think one of the things that we collectively need to do as this commission in the city is work out the process by which we're processing some of the internal deliverables, because there's quick turnaround times relative to changes and modifications. I think we need to just make sure that we've got that, and also changing the reporting from the Public Works Department to the appropriate entity, and that would be one of the things that the legal would do. But conceptually, I don't have a problem with the proposed contract, subject to some of those clarifications. But again, I think some of those clarifications are incumbent upon whether it's the Board of Public Works or others to just have a process in place and articulated as sort of a standalone document, or internal standard operating procedures, and how we'll address the provisions in here.
Absolutely. And for these commissioners, we do have the team from CIP on WebEx if you have specific questions you'd like them to answer to. Mr. Force.
Eric, I'm not clear. We're discussing and possibly acting on this contract, but you're saying that the city's legal department has some other things to work out. I'm not sure whether we as a board want to know what those are before we approve this, or
Yeah, so.
are you asking us to approve it today?
I am contingent on, or subject to, legal's final approval of language and other. So when CIP sent this over, right, they sent it over along with a summary from their legal department highlighting some of the legal language and some other things. Our legal department, over the last few days, has reviewed it, but, hasn't had a conversation with their legal to make, any appropriate changes. Tegan is here. If you, Tegan, do you want to come up and just highlight some of the things? And that we'll probably be discussing with their legal team.
And also to clarify, this is for the relationship. It's not necessarily for the spending portion of it.
That's correct too, right? So this is for the relationship to begin, and obviously, once the funding is known, then that will come forward for approval to actually do the work, yep.
Tegan, our assistant city attorney, welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, so some of the issues, so when I reviewed this contract, there were just some questions and issues that I had. that I was going to discuss with Anne, and then see if she agreed with those questions and concerns, and she did agree with those, but I didn't find that out until today, and so we haven't had a chance yet to discuss this with the legal team from CIP, but some of the questions that I had raised were whether or not there's I call it, it's not very legal, but a get out clause. So if there's something in this relationship, how can we get out of the contract, or if there's a way for us to get out of the contract? That was something that I had some questions and concerns on. And then in the definitions section, they had the acceptance of the completed project. And then I just thought it needed to be hashed out a little bit more about who is accepting the completed project, whether or not that was city officials or whether or not it was their project manager.
Or maybe a third party.
Or maybe a third party. So I just kind of figured that needed to be hashed out a little bit more. Some other issues in Article 4, just the amount. The bid amount was in brackets, and it was 20,000, and I just wanted to make sure that we were in agreement with our procurement policy, and so that was language that I figured we needed to discuss so that we could also be, so that we're not violating any procurement policy that we have.
Thanks for that.
And then, do you want me to go through everything, or?
I think any of the highlights,
Okay.
Tegan, that you
All
have,
right.
I think the commissioners would appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, so then in section 5, under warranty, just wanted to make sure that I had a better understanding of what that language was. There's some questions in here about the manager's warranty and what's excluded and what's not excluded, so I just wanted to make sure that we were 100% in agreement on that. And then I had some questions about the change orders in 5.6, where it said in the last line that the manager may make changes that do not constitute material change orders without notice to the owner. And I had wanted to perhaps discuss that with Eric and Ann and see if that was something that is okay, because to me that kind of caught me off guard. You're going to make some changes without discussing it with the people who are going to be liable for it later. And then just some questions about the rejection of the material change order. If there was a request for that, what would happen if there's an actual rejection, whether or not they're still required to do the work that they previously agreed to do. So there was some language clarification that I had wanted to see there. And again, some of these questions and concerns that I have could just be addressed just by simply talking to the other side and talking to their attorneys. We just haven't gotten to that step yet, because Ann and I haven't had a chance to discuss. And then in Article 6 with compensation, I just had some questions with that under 6.2, because basically for this, it seemed like that there's going to be a 7.2% markup on the costs, and we're just looking to see, so this is the baseline, and what's the floor and what's the ceiling. Just kind of want to make sure that we're within our budget on that, and make sure that there's going to be no surprises later in the future. And then under Article 7, the indemnification and insurance, there is just some there's some language in here that said that they would settle some claims without the approval of the city indemnified parties. And so I just kind of wanted to get some clarification from the attorneys on that, and discuss it with Ann to see if we had some proposed language that we liked better. And there were some sections in section 10 that I liked. I thought, they have the governing law and the time is of the essence. Those are all necessary, and those are all there. So that was good. I did have some questions with 10.14 with termination. Just some questions with the language. I kind of felt it was overly broad, and just wanted to discuss it with the attorneys and Anne to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then there's one section that explains the substantial breach of the provisions of the agreement, and just wanted to kind of hash out who are going to decide, who determines what is the substantial breach and how are we defining substantial breach. And again, some of these things, they might like simply be resolved with a conversation. We haven't had that yet. Just wanted to, I know I've said that several times, but just
Thank you
just
for
in
that.
case, I know the attorneys are on the line and this is the first time they're hearing it and they don't want them to be caught off guard by that. I understand it could be resolved with a simple conversation. Yeah, and then there was just some questions with termination for city convenience on page 28. It's the 10.14 section C. Just some questions about that 12.5% termination fee. Just wanted to see if that was going to be negotiable or not, because that seemed a bit high. And I think that Eric might have had a conversation with them as well. I could be wrong about that though, so don't quote me on that. And then for the attachments, I didn't, and maybe I missed it and it wasn't included in mine, or I just misread it, but I didn't see the attachments for the annual plan, the project book, the codes and standards, or the application for payment. And it might just not have been included in my copy, but I didn't see that anywhere. I did, this is like super nitpicky. I did see a typo in Schedule 1 under the manager's insurance coverage. I think that they meant to say statutes and not statues. And then, yeah, just some, I know, just wanted to make sure that we're in line with our, so under the special provisions for insurance, just wanted to make sure that we're in line with what our requirements are and that they match here. And so just, that's just a double checking to make sure that we're all in line with our requirements and that they're following what our rules require. And then Schedule 2, the socioeconomic development implementation plan. And this might just be because I'm new here and don't quite know all the acronyms yet, but I didn't know what SWMBE stood for. And so I kind of wanted that to be explained to me. That was just the gist of the questions I had. And again, that's something to discuss probably with Eric and Anne and then with the attorneys for CIP. Do you guys have any questions for me on that?
If you haven't met Tegan before, she's very, very thorough, and we're so happy you're here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Did you have a question?
I was just going to raise the issue of the insurance coverage. It seemed low to me relative to changes. And I think that's small women, minority business enterprises.
Okay.
Look at you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Force?
Is it appropriate that we approve this contingent upon the settlement of the issues that the attorney has raised with
I think so, unless
the
there's
provider?
something that would be considered a showstopper, and I would rely on the city attorney's office to tell us if there was something irreconcilable that we needed to know. Otherwise, I would feel comfortable contingently approving this.
Moving it along.
Yeah. Mr. Robinson?
Toward that end, who is the entity entering into the agreement? Is it the commission? Is it the city? So are we approving it, or are we recommending approval subject to those issues being resolved? So does it go to the council?
Wasn't intended to, because the commission has the authority to enter into contracts, right? But what will go to council is the actual funding for the project, because they're the only ones that can approve that borrowing. So they will see this, and they'll actually approve the implementation of the project with the funding. So kind of a two-step process as we move forward.
Mr. Jean?
The termination percentage is 12.5, but is that what we owe them, or is that contract from year, let's say we did that at the end of year 1, is that the remaining 4 years fees?
So that's a good question, and that's why that was something that I had wanted to discuss with Anne and the attorneys for the CIP. I don't know, maybe they can answer it now, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if
This is-
Sean, if you guys have any input on that, just to help clarify.
There's no dollar amount owed for termination. The city can terminate at any time. It's just whatever is spent to date, we earn our 12.5% fee as a termination because we won't have the chance to earn our incentive fees if the city decides to terminate it for convenience.
Does that clarify things? Mr. Robinson, you look quizzical.
I'm trying to figure out how to frame the motion. So, you know, there are legal issues, but there needs to be an arbitrator to determine if the resolution of those issues is in the city's interest. So the negotiations would take place between the corresponding legal staff of the city and others, but who, upon the finalization of those discussions, who is the person? Can we direct the mayor or the president of the commission, which are the same, to upon resolution or reconciliation of those issues, authorize them to enter into the contract and, you know, satisfactory to the city?
So how we did it in Utah, if there was something, and you guys can tell me if this isn't how we do it here, that's fine. So how we did it there was, it was phrased, you know, they'll approve the agreement subject to the negotiations with the city attorney's office and the CIP. And then the person who would, once that was done, then it was the city attorney's office's job to take it to the signatory. And in this case, it looks like it would be the mayor. But is that how it's done here as well?
I think we could do that, and I will also tell you that I don't sign anything unless the city attorney feels comfortable with me signing something. So if there's a showstopper that we could not reconcile through this process, I would just have to bring it back to you all at our next Wausau Waterworks Commission meeting, and we would talk through it. Mr. Force,
And just to point out, that next meeting is 2.5 weeks?
look at us go. Yeah,
Okay, so it's not far off.
right. And also, it could be, we give you an update on how that all went at the next meeting anyway, even if there was nothing that we disagreed on. Mr. Robinson.
I would move that the commission approve entering into the contract subject to legal review and approval, and authorize the appropriate officials to sign it upon the resolution of those issues.
Sorry, I'm writing it down, so when I have to read it back.
Is that,
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is to approve entering into the contract subject to legal review and approval, and authorize the appropriate officials to sign off. Do I have a second? Looks like I have Alder Herbst as a second. Any further discussion on this item? All right, so all of those in favor of approving entering into a contract with Community Infrastructure Partners for lead service line replacement, subject to legal review and approval of the city attorney's office, and authorizing the appropriate official to sign off on this agreement, can signify by saying aye.
aye.
Any opposition? All right, woohoo, thank you. That one's settled for now, and I guess you can expect an update at our next meeting. Thank you, CIP, for joining us.
Thank you.
Next up, we have item number 9, discussion and possible action on approving a reimbursement resolution for the Clean Water Fund for the wastewater treatment facility headworks project.
Yeah, so if you recall, a couple months ago, we did a number of these. They came through the commission. This is our applications to the DNR Safe Drinking Water and Clean Water Fund loan, looking for grant principal forgiveness funding for projects. This is an additional project we have submitted, and this is the reimbursement resolution that allows us to use those grant and loan funds to reimburse us for work that's done ahead of the actual funding that's allocated to the city. So this will go on to council next week, I believe, for final approval.
Mr. Force.
Just a question, guys. Are we adding influence screens that we did not have before? And if so, why were they not part of the original design? Sorry.
Go ahead, Ben.
In the original facilities plan, it was part of the design, but for cost-saving measures, it was decided not to proceed with the headworks part of the treatment facility. So now we are venturing into that to take care of the headworks that should have been done in the first place. So
So the screens are there, Jim, but there's, we have issues with the building, we have issues on how to clean the screens, so, yeah, this is part of the project that was removed initially for the funding.
And is there a financial impact to us as a commission?
The total project, potentially, if, depending on how much loan and grant that we received. Now, the city did obligate $800,000 towards the project with ARPA dollars at this point.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure how much principal forgiveness we're going to get. We haven't seen those funding allocations yet.
Okay, but the estimated cost is 3.75 million?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Just for clarification, the work is already being done, now we're just trying to seek reimbursement for it.
no.
Like some of the engineering work and stuff has been done to help out with the application and stuff. But no, the work has not been
Contingent
done.
upon funding,
Correct.
Yeah,
Right now, we're in the design phase.
Yep.
And the plans and specs have been submitted to the DNR, and we're able to alter those plans and resubmit, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah,
Have
ma-
a change.
yeah, make revisions to anything
Revisions
that we have, and,
and that.
yeah.
And just an FYI, we're using the existing headworks?
We're altering the headworks and we're redesigning it so we can get the step screens from the basement up, so we can work on them, do preventive maintenance on them. There'll be new step screens. The ones in place are aged and outlive their,
Not impacting our effluent quality, though?
it will not.
Okay.
No, if anything, it'll help capture more solids, the large debris. So,
Do I have a motion? All right, it looks like Mr. Jean has a motion to approve this, and a second by Alder Herbst. Any further comment? All right, all of those in favor of approving a reimbursement resolution for the Clean Water Fund for the wastewater treatment facility headworks project can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? All right, that passes. All right, last item, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Mr. Robinson and a second by Mr. Force. All in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, thank you, everyone.